Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode with Mr. Smeef. Smith, Smythe, Smeef, Schmeet. I've actually been called all of those variations of my last name from people of various backgrounds. It's all good, as long as you don't call me not humble, because hopefully I'm always staying humble. We should all stay humble as much as we can. Christ said, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Meek does not mean weak or that you are pushover. It means humble. Anywho, what you see on the screen there is this thing, this meme, I guess, that's going out and around. And it might be on T-shirts, and they throw it in there, and I don't know where I got this from, but it's been going around all over the internet. And what this is, flat out, is an attempt at mind control, brainwashing. It's a shaming tactic. They're telling you that these various topics, they're telling you what the, quote, truth is. And, but it's not the truth. Okay? Now, let's go through these, right? And don't ever let anybody shame you for investigating, for example, the truth about vaccines, whether the earth is flat or not, etc., etc. You should always be checking these things out. After all, true science is the scientific method, which means you investigate, you make observations, you develop maybe your own hypothesis as to what is correct, and then you're supposed to test your hypothesis. And if it's not correct, you have to be humble enough to accept that you were wrong and move on. True science is not really done today, right? Some guy in a lab coat looking into a microscope is not necessarily doing science. God knows what he's doing. Okay? So, at the end there, when it says stand up for science, well, their science is a religion. You're supposed to just believe it without ever questioning it. That's what science now is today. It's a religion. It's funny. And what did I think the Apostle Timothy say? I think it's in 1 Timothy. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but he says, "Beware of science so-called." Right? Science so-called. He doesn't say beware of science. He said beware of science so-called. And that's what we have today. We have this science so-called. You hear the buzzword science. "Yes, Mr. Scientist, I believe everything you say. Yes, you are correct. I don't even have to think for myself. You do it for me." Yeah, that's a religion. Anyway, let's take a look at some of these. But this is a shaming tactic, of course. It says, the earth is not flat. Well, again, about 6 years ago, the flat earth theory reared its head again. The flat earth concept actually comes from, I believe it's an ancient Persian ideology. And I looked into the flat earth, and there's a lot of things about and there's a couple. Remember, there's a few different flat earth theories. Now, and I don't think we're really going to know exactly what the earth looks like until we go to the next level. Now, I believe in the Bible. The Bible says the earth is like a stone, so that would imply that it's not flat. So I believe at the moment the earth is not flat. However, the Bible also says that the sun and the moon move through portals. They circle the earth. It's not the other way around. So I don't believe the earth is flat, but I also don't believe the official astronomy that they tell us, that the earth revolves around the sun and the sun is 93 million miles away. Common sense tells you that you can't see anything that's 2 miles away. How the heck are you going to see anything that's 93 million miles away? So there was a lot of people 6 years ago that were doing flat Earth investigation. Okay. Now, so my conclusion, for what it's worth, is the flat Earth theories are not correct, although there might be some aspects of them that are correct. And again, I believe in the Bible. I guess you could say that's not that scientific, but one thing I can say about the Bible, that it hasn't been wrong once, so why would it be wrong when it says the earth is like a rock suspended in space? Okay. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I don't believe a word of that, what that guy says, but he is the spokesperson for science. He's like the rock star scientist right now. He's one of them, right? He says the earth is pear-shaped. So, we'll put that on the shelf. I don't want to get into a debate about the exact shape of the earth. But my point is, do not let them shame you for looking into various theories as to what the shape of the earth is. So you can make up your own decision. Don't let them shame you. And I think the reason why, they don't care whether you believe the earth is flat or not. They, meaning the powers that be, the Roman powers that be, that are in cahoots with the Asian, Chinese powers that be. Anyway, let's look at the next topic, shall we? I'm not going to use the actual word. You can see it there in yellow. We'll call them needle drugs. It says needle drugs work. So they're trying to shame you into questioning whether these needle drugs that they all want us to take, do they actually work? Now, this is an interesting little wordplay here. Needle drugs have never been the answer to health. It wasn't needle drugs that cured polio or eradicated polio or smallpox. If you do your research, from what I've learned, it was just cleaning up the working conditions and the living conditions and getting rid of toxins in the environment that cause the polio and smallpox scourges to go away. So in that respect, needle drugs have never worked for our health. They don't. The flu needle drugs they give you actually have shown to make your immune system weaker for the next round, for the next year of the so-called flu. And I don't want to get into that when I mean so-called flu. Flu means influenza, which comes from the word to influence. It's a lot of flus are caused by electromagnetic radiation, in other words, intensity radio waves. So that's something to think about. I want to do something on that very soon. In fact, the so-called Spanish flu of 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, was actually, there's no evidence that it was actually caused by some virus floating around, being passed from person to person. It was actually caused by the newly created radio waves that the militaries were using in World War I. I'll get into that another time. So no, these needle drugs don't work for health, and I don't take them. And of course that means I'm being persecuted because of it, but that's okay. Now, when they say that needle drugs work, right, and of course I'm using the word needle drugs instead of the V word. When they say that needle drugs work, they are actually correct from the powers that be's perspective. They want you to be sick, right? We know there's mRNA in some of these needle drugs that will change your genome. That's what they want. People are going to be bugging out. There's also toxins in these needle drugs that might cause your heart to stop, right? People have been reporting that after they've had a friend or somebody they know taking these needle drugs, they have a heart attack. And some of these needle drugs that they give people are placebos. And that works for their agenda as well, because people will say, I took the needle drugs and I'm fine. Yeah, that's because you got sugar water. But that's what they want. Okay? So it's interesting how the powers that be, they will play with the words. So when they say needle drugs work, yes, they work for their agenda, not for what you think or what you believe they work for. But again, don't be shamed to question these needle drugs that they're giving you. Do not let them shame you. Right? They're going to make it into a political thing like, what are you, a Trumper? What are you, a right-wing crazy nut? It's not about that. It's not about left-wing or right-wing or any of that stuff. It's just about, hey, I want to know all about putting these needle drugs into my body before I do it, because there's nothing more dangerous than sticking things right into your bloodstream. Please. I know somebody that took the needle drugs, and lo and behold, they have a strange mass on their pituitary gland. You think? Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Let's look at the next one. We've been to the moon. That's extremely debatable. How come nobody's been to the moon in over 50 years? You think they would just keep going back? NASA, I showed a video to some students like 10 years ago. And it was a NASA video. And there was this young, hip scientist. He was about 30 years old. And this was a video they clearly make for middle school kids and even elementary school kids and high school students and even college, I guess. But he's like a young, hip, good-looking NASA scientist, alleged scientist, of course. He looked to be about 30, NASA engineer. And he said, yeah, we're developing new rockets to go into space. But we have one problem. We can't get past the Van Allen belt. And the students, they went right over their heads. They don't know. But he's telling you that they can't get past the Van Allen belt. So how do they get past the Van Allen belt in 1969 to get to the moon? Busted. And of course, that's part of their lesser magic. Magic meaning psychology. They tell you the truth. They slip it in there. I don't know if I still have it on my computer, but Buzz Aldrin admitted like 10 years ago that they did not go to the moon. He was doing an interview, and this young girl, probably about 13 or something, asked him, how come you haven't gone to the moon in over 40 years? And he got real quiet for a second. He said, that's a big question for a little girl. And he kind of put his head down, and he said very softly, he said, quote, because we never went. And that's that, unquote. Now, according to the scriptures, the moon is an angel. It's a female angel, by the way. Her light is soft. You know, this is a fact, that when you stick a thermometer in the moonlight, the temperature actually drops at night. And then when you take that thermometer and put it in the shade from the moonlight, the temperature actually goes up a little bit. So the light from the moon actually cools things down. Right? The sun is a masculine angel. The sun heats things up. He gets you going. He's the initiator. He's the boss, right? And the moon is the complement. She's soft. She's feminine. She calms you down. She keeps everything calm. She brings that feminine presence that makes everybody go, everything's cool. So if the moon is a female angel, according to the scriptures, how can you land on it? Now, angels are made of fire, right? Even astronomers tell you that the stars are made of fire and plasma. So how can you land on the moon if it's a ball of plasma? Now, there was a true scientist in the 1960s mid-60s, but he was from another country. And he was interviewed. And the interviewer says, this scientist says, he's done the research. The moon is a ball of plasma, he says. And the interviewer says, well, the Russians and the Americans are planning to send manned missions to the moon. And this scientist kind of laughed. He says, no, well, they can't land on the moon. It's plasma. Plasma, if you don't know, is a super, super heated gas. It's hotter than any gas you know. So, I mean, if you were thrown into a ball of plasma, you would burn up. You would vaporize immediately. Anyway. But they want you to know that we've been to the moon, right? And then they're going to make it sound like you're a, crazy tinfoil hat guy if you don't believe they went to the moon. But there's so much evidence out there that they did not go to the moon, and the moon landing was just a made-for-TV movie. Some people say it was a distraction, right, from the Vietnam War. I personally, now again, I can't prove this. I'm just making it very clear. This is just my hypothesis, and unfortunately, I don't think I'm ever going to test it to see if I'm right or wrong. But they created this fantasy of going to the moon so that everybody would buy into NASA. Right, NASA is one of the biggest money-making organizations out there. You see young people, middle school kids, I want to work for NASA someday. Yeah, I want to go to the moon. I want to go to Mars, right? They're promoting this fantasy world. And, of course, then NASA gets money from the government, so our tax money goes to NASA, and they sell millions of dollars worth of T-shirts, and it's a whole thing. So there's always money involved. Then there's the higher level reason why NASA exists, right? I'm not going to get into that here. But of course, money is always one of the reasons. Anyway, let's go to the next thing. Chemtrails aren't a thing. In all honesty, to somebody that is under maybe 25, you would probably not believe in chemtrails because you have been under the chemtrail thing all your life, so it's just normal to you. But anybody over 25 that actually believes that chemtrails are not a thing, you got to get your head out of your you-know-where. All you got to do is look into the sky on a daily basis, and you will eventually see these strips that eventually spread out into a haze. Those strips are not natural clouds. They are sprayed by airplanes, and they are not water vapor that evaporates because it doesn't evaporate. They absolutely are spraying the skies with all kinds of crap. And in I talk to a lot of friends of mine who are very well educated and very intelligent. And we've all kind of come to the conclusion that there's probably a multiple reason why they're spraying the skies. One of which is to make people sick and have respiratory problems. Oh, isn't that interesting? Another one is to change the weather. And that brings us to the next thing. But they're trying to shame you and tell you that chemtrails don't exist. That's just, it's beyond proven that they do exist. Let's go to the next thing. Actually, before we go on to the next thing, when I discovered chemtrails probably in the late 2000s, and I live in LA, a lot of you guys know that, and normally one of the hottest months in Los Angeles and the surrounding areas, of course, is August. I always tell people, LA, well, not now because LA's collapsing with all the economy stuff and the homeless and the crime, but back in the day, I would always tell people the 3 months you might not want to visit LA, weather-wise, would be August, September, and October, because it's usually very hot It can be brutally hot, and unless you're staying by the beach the whole time. But if you're inland, you want to visit downtown, Hollywood, whatever, the entertainment areas. August, September, and October are not the greatest months. Every other month is nice. However, August used to be clear and very hot back in the 90s. And then all throughout the 2000s, I didn't really notice it, but I remember in the late 2000s saying to myself, I'm like, wow, we had a really mild August this year. And then there was a haze all throughout the month of August in the late 2000s, which kind of blocked the sun and lower the temperatures. And we have not had a really hot August since. But when I was a child, and I've lived in LA since I was 3 years old, August was always clear and hot. Right? And we don't see puffy clouds in LA anymore. That's another thing. So another reason why some people believe, a hypothesis as to why they're chemtrailing, is that they're blocking out the sun. And that brings us to the next thing. It says climate change is real. Here's another play on words. The global warming is a complete, that's been debunked by real scientists, right? And the belief that all these cars and factories and people exhaling CO2 in the air, and that's causing global warming, that's a bunch of crap. Now, climate change is real, though, but it's because they're doing it. The powers that be are doing it. Okay, the climate change that you're taught to believe that it's just because of overpopulation, lie. Okay. Look into that. Look into overpopulation. Really question that. I see plenty of land everywhere. Right? It's a shaming tactic. Oh, human beings, we're so horrible. We're overpopulated. We got to stop having children. It's a depopulation campaign. That's what they're doing. It's a psychological tactic. Remember, all is fair in love and war, right? War does not have to be fought with bullets and guns. It can be fought with needle drugs. It can be fought with shaming tactics. Right? But climate change is real. But it's because they're doing it, right? With the HAARP. Research that if you've never heard of that. HAARP, HAARP, the HAARP machine. We know for a fact, and they even said it on mainstream media, that NASA can make clouds. That's part of NASA's job, is to make clouds. We know that they did weather warfare in Vietnam. They had it rain on the Viet Cong to disrupt their operations. We know that Russia and the United States signed a pact, I believe in the 1950s, not to do weather warfare on each other. So they absolutely are manipulating the weather. And of course, the chemtrails are part of that. I personally think, and Zeph Daniel also has this same hypothesis, that one of the reasons why they're chemtrailing California so much is because they want to block out the sun. That's one of the reasons. By blocking out the sun, the lakes and oceans don't evaporate, therefore you do not get rain clouds. So they're turning California into a desert. And then they tell us there's a drought all the time, which water never leaves the planet. So I don't know how that is possible, especially when you have this Pacific Ocean right there, which you can build a water desalination plant to get all the water you need. But yet we're in a drought. And of course, all our showers are being turned down, right? And everybody's got to watch the water. Right. So it's funny. It's another play on words. Climate change is real. Yes, it's real. They are changing the climate using their weather modification devices. But climate change based on just natural overpopulation, evolution of the species, there's too many people on the planet, that's a bunch of crap. But they want you to feel bad about that. So stand up for science. Okay, what they're telling you is believe in the same religion they believe in. Okay, so just thought so please, whatever, young folks, do not be shamed into looking into these topics and coming and applying true science, right? The scientific method. And have courage and to stand for the truth. And one way you can do that is to develop a relationship with the Most High God, and He will start guiding you to the truth, and you will start becoming more confident in yourself and not be shamed by these tactics. Anyway, may the Most High bless you and keep you. Thanks for dropping in, and we'll see you on the next one.